I've never mentioned this before, but I really like Transformers Animated. Today we're gonna rank all 42 episodes. Which episodes and storylines are the best of the best? How do the show's highest points compare to the show's lowest? Let's dive across its 3 seasons to find out. As much as I adore the series, I do have some earnest criticism of it. I was skimming my channel and I think it's literally been like 4 years since I've said anything negative about Transformers Animated. I had under 1,000 subscribers back then. This will probably be the first time any of you hear me say anything negative about the show. And that in and of itself should be indicative of how high a regard I hold this series in. So keep that in mind as I tear these bottom few episodes to shreds. In last place, we have Season 1, Episode 5, Total Meltdown. Most of the episode is an origin story for the human supervillain Meltdown, who's turned into a madman with an acid touch during a freak lab accident. Driven by a one-note hatred of Professor Sumdac and robots, Meltdown's a character who fails to leave much of an impression. Celebrity guest star Peter Stormare gives a very flat performance. Meltdown speaks the same when he's happy, as when he's mad, as when he's sad.
You can't do that!
He's a very subdued, dramatic actor, and that didn't necessarily translate well to a high-energy animated series. The only memorable part of this episode is the idea that Sumdac caused something terrible to happen to Fanzone's wife.
So we don't have a repeat of that unfortunate incident with the captain's wife.
More fuel to the fire that they are gay.
My regards to your wife, Captain.
The episode hints at a deeper connection between Prometheus Black and Sumdac.
I refuse to be beaten by some simpering nerd who merely got lucky!
Sumdac did get lucky, he just found Megatron. He's really a pretty dumb guy. But Meltdown doesn't know that. It's just a coincidence. If he does somehow know about the Megatron head in the lab, it's a shame the show never explored that. The flip side of the episode focuses on Bumblebee, who's insecure about his height, although it's really just a handful of instances of him asking people to stop making height jokes, with no real progression.
His attention span is short too.
I heard that!
Apparently, so is his fuse.
Until he saves the day and declares the following.
I may be small, but I'm scrappy! And I can run circles around your big old rusty chassis!
It's a very undercooked conclusion to a character arc that frankly feels shoehorned in. Colossus Rhodes also gets a huge chunk of the runtime, who's a complete afterthought of a villain. He's the only named character in this show who never comes back after season 1. He was just boring. This episode really just feels like a waste. It's a really well animated episode for this show, which is a shame given how many better episodes there are. But also, the series production bible just has way stronger episode concepts than this one that didn't make the cut. Number 41. Sorry No One's Home is the Home Alone homage episode, where Sorry fends off Mixmaster and Scrapper as they invade the Autobot base. Unfortunately, the premise is a lot stronger in concept than in execution. It feels like an 11-minute episode was dragged out to 22, as everything moves at a snail's pace until Sorry actually starts playing offense in the last 6 minutes. None of Sorry's most endearing traits really show themselves here, and Mixmaster and Scrapper aren't entertaining enough to carry this much of an episode by themselves.
Mix, I'm stuck! Get me out of here!
Quit whining, you big nail clipper!
The Blitzwing Battle B plot has some classic moments peppered throughout it, but that can't save this one from being an episode I rarely come to re-watch.
Is everything okay with you guys?
Define okay.
I'm definitely a TFA superfan. I spent a lot more time thinking about this series than most people, but the flip side of that is that the negative aspects of it stand out to me way more than they would to most people. Those last two we covered, I have complete apathy towards. The next entry makes me feel many things, as you'll discover. Strap in. Number 40 is In-Game Part 2. Transformers Animated Series finale is anticlimactic and terribly dissatisfying, but that isn't its fault. When Marty, Derek, and Matt were working on this episode, they were fully expecting a renewal for at least one more season. They knew there was a chance this would be their final one, but it didn't seem likely at the time. I'm sure Marty would have chosen to write his own finale if he knew. As such, you can't really blame Endgame for failing to tie up all the story threads that were left dangling. There really wouldn't have been time. What I can blame the episode for is everything else. At its core, Endgame Part 2 is just a series of things happening. 100 different action-oriented subplots with no real protagonist. It's a trap that a lot of the season finales fell into, but this one's the worst by far.
Everyone's a critic.
Let's first touch on the fact that the episode is a mess, with some of the sloppiest editing of the entire show. There's jarring, rapid cuts between scenes throughout the whole runtime. Right here, Shockwave reveals himself on the moon. Then we cut back to Earth, and we see Megatron transform into a helicopter. Cut to Bumblebee saying, "We'll hold off Shockwave" for 10 seconds. Then you cut back to Earth. It's like non-stop. You can just feel cutscenes and deleted moments permeating this episode's entire 20 minutes. And I think they needed to restructure this in the editing bay to bridge the gaps. Like right here.
We need to upload your recognition code into Omega Supreme's processor.
There's a 10-second scene of Ratchet and RC climbing a ladder. Then 18 seconds of Bumblebee, Bulkhead, and Sari looking at protoforms. Then it goes right back to Ratchet and RC, exactly where we last left them. Why wouldn't you just move them climbing the ladder right next to the scene that picks up immediately after they climb the ladder? The original plans for Season 3 were for Megatron and Starscream to remain largely absent until finally showing up in the season finale with Omega Supreme under their control. When Cartoon Network wanted a 3-part movie premiere, Marty Eisenberg Frankenstein together transwarped out of 2 existing episode scripts intertwined with the Omega Supreme and Cybertron subplots. Now, Omega Supreme showed up in the premiere instead of the finale. This left the team floundering when it came to how to end the season. Devastator became the plan, but when Hasbro was hesitant to use that character ahead of Revenge of the Fallen, the plan became Decepticon-controlled Omega Supreme again, although this time he'd have clones, tying into the Starscream cloning storyline from Season 2. The end result is a frankly underwhelming final threat for the Autobots to face, given how derivative it is of prior ideas that had already been done better. These Lugnut Supremes are pathetic. It takes one hammer blast to completely ground them and disable one.
Lugnut, this field test has been a complete failure.
Omega Supreme himself does more damage to the city in this episode than the clones do. They have one job, destroy Sumdac Tower, and they can't even do it. Imagine if they actually, knocked down Sumdac Tower. This episode would have been crazy. The episode has 3 good, satisfying moments. Bumblebee and Bulkhead defeating Shockwave, Megatron remembering Prime's name, and Prowl's sacrifice, but all 3 of them are so rushed and just aren't given the fanfare they deserve.
No.
You have interfered with me.
Prowl would have been mourned come Season 4, so I'm more forgiving there. But Bee and Bulkhead take out this menace who basically engineered the destruction of their lives and their outcasting from Autobot society, along with many others, and don't get a second to reflect on it.
Pal?
Let's review, class. There are 100 counties.
While Megatron's declaration of Prime's name is immediately juxtaposed with a cut as well.
Optimus Prime.
So you can remember my name. No!
And what's crazier is that the episode has a ton of moments of breathing room, but they're all in the wrong places. They're like stuffed in the middle of action scenes where they weren't really necessary.
Is everybody alright?
All Autobots, half-bots, and almost bots present and accounted for.
No.
This episode didn't even do a clear job at explaining a major story element. These protoforms on the Nemesis, which we learned Starscream had been using for his clones, are supposed to be the same protoforms stolen from the temple in Prowl's flashbacks. Supplementary materials in the Trial of Megatron outline make it clear, but that seems like such a major, emotionally significant thing to not even clarify, because most people I've talked to never put that together. And it's because the show didn't spend any time reflecting on how big of a moment this was. Even worse is that Prowl didn't even get to learn they recovered them.
Sorry, I think there's something you need to see.
Bumblebee and Bulkhead casually bring Sari to look at the protoforms, seemingly forgetting that Detroit is under attack right now, and one of their friends is going to lose his life in a few minutes because of how dire the situation is. But sure, just look at protoforms, why not? There's a deleted scene where Starscream gets resurrected by Slipstream, mere minutes after his death. Alex and I animated it a few years ago, came out kinda mid, but whatever, it's fine. According to Marty, the scene was only cut from animation when it became clear that they wouldn't get a 4th season.
They were boarding and assembling that episode, I think we had gotten the word.
I just want to ask, would you have moved it to season 4?
Had you gotten one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's necessary.
Had animated had a 4th season, this scene would have remained, and even though this didn't wind up happening, it still bothers me. Either kill Starscream or don't. This was a cool way to offline him, but his death was so casual and nonchalant given the significance of the character. No one reacts, no one even sees him die. This didn't have the makings of a legendary moment like Bumblebee's death fake out in Prime's finale. What was even the point of writing this if the script brought him back a few pages later? The episode's plagued with bizarre, logical inconsistencies, like Megatron is specifically targeting Sumdac Tower.
Let's begin this field test with Sumdac Tower. I want to see my former prison crumble to the ground.
So tell me, why are they evacuating all the humans into Sumdac Tower?
Yes! Get these humans to Sumdac Tower! Right now it's the safest place in the city!
Or why aren't they using their fully functioning space bridge to get backup from Cybertron and bring in the elite guard to capture the Autobots' immortal enemy Megatron? Those are just whatever, okay? But what derails the story is a series of plot holes that amount to Prowl's sacrifice being completely pointless. It all starts with Omega Supreme and the logistics of controlling him. The last 3 episodes of the season revolve around the Decepticons stealing RC to use her activation code to take control of Omega Supreme. But this doesn't make any sense. Ratchet brings him online with the activation code because RC imprinted it upon him.
The intel officer you treated in the field was carrying the activation codes for Omega Supreme.
She must have planted a fail-safe retrieval program on you. That's why you were able to download her access codes when you performed open processor surgery on her.
Highbrow establishes that this means Ratchet is now the only one who can activate Omega.
He requires a mentor bot to imprint upon.
That bot was meant to be Agent RC. She was a teacher before she joined Intel Division.
But now, since the recognition code has been transferred, that mentor bot is you, Field Tech Ratchet.
Eventually, Omega's mortally wounded in battle, and Ratchet puts him into stasis. About 4 million years later, he brings him back online with a bunch of Allspark fragments. Then he hops in this portal and transwarps into space, where he runs into Megatron and tries to transwarp him to Cybertron. The effort of the transwarp depowers him and puts him back into stasis.
The effort of the transwarp must have put the Autobot into sleep mode. This is not Cybertron.
Megatron's then able to take control of him by hot-wiring him with stasis cuffs, while Prowl takes control of him by plugging his fist into cyberspace, and Starscream takes control of him by wiring his head to the stasis cuffs. Omega's also brought into a state of consciousness while all this happens. Ratchet fires his EMP at Omega Supreme, which does not deactivate him due to Starscream's Allspark power, apparently.
Your EMP is useless against my Allspark power!
Then he blasts into space and starts randomly transwarping due to the plasma dynamic thruster. We see him again 8 episodes later. Lugnut joins them, he removes the plasma dynamic thruster. Now Omega's fully in sleep mode, and the Decepticons need RC's activation code to take control of him. It's never explained why he went offline, since the EMP clearly didn't do it, but I suppose we can infer the transwarp effort put him into sleep mode again. I promise this is all going somewhere. There's no explanation why they don't just take control of him via the various 3 ways they did before. It seems this time, he's inexplicably so thoroughly deactivated that they just straight up need his base activation code again. They go to kidnap RC, which doesn't quite make sense since she seemingly transferred her code to Ratchet. Apparently she was conscious the entire time too, and she transfers her code into Lugnut.
The damage done to her circuitry is completely irreversible.
Lugnut uses this code to bring the 3 clones online for the first time. And on that note, she later activates Omega Supreme in this episode with the same code, meaning that Ratchet absolutely did not have to be the mentor bot to activate Omega Supreme, if RC could just shoot this code infinitely. Lugnut's code is
missing a security upgrade patch, but I think I can rig up a bypass.
Which means that only Lugnut can control the clones manually through this complicated foray of wires. This is paramount. Megatron cannot control the clones. Only Lugnut can.
Is there any way to bypass this endless pontificating and command these clones directly? You'll just have to relay all orders through Lugnut.
Eventually, the Autobots kick Lugnut out of Omega Supreme and he yells to Omega,
Stop! Obey me!
despite the fact that he was never controlling Omega at all. Then, out of nowhere, Starscream takes control of the Lugnut Supremes.
Greetings, Megatron!
While he is flying through space and nowhere near a control apparatus. There is no explanation given. I like to imagine that maybe Starscream somehow stole the security upgrade patch and that's the reason it's missing. But even still, that doesn't explain how he took control of the clones without the activation code, since this episode insists the code is necessary to control them. Starscream has, at some point, outfitted the Lugnut Supremes with massive bombs that will obliterate Detroit and beyond.
The self-destruct mechanism that will destroy you once and for all! Along with any unfortunate human or Autobot in a 100-mile radius.
Now, Prowl has to give his life to protect the city from these clones that Starscream is controlling with no explanation whatsoever. Even worse is that they continue functioning and fighting Omega Supreme after Starscream's death, when he's no longer around to control them. Prowl is gathering the Allspark fragments to shield the city from this blast, and sacrifices his spark in the process. In his last act of consciousness, he surrounds the Lugnut Supreme in this force field. The show completely forgets about this other one that's lying over here. Omega Supreme knocked it down, it still has a bomb in his chest. It doesn't get shielded and we don't see it again. But he does shield one, and Megatron's still inside. Then the Supreme explodes. A hyper-concentrated explosion that originally would have spread 100 miles. And is now immensely more powerful within this bubble. And Megatron shows up 30 seconds later having casually survived the whole thing. So there's two options. Either Megatron surviving this is bullshit, or Starscream vastly exaggerated the power of the blast, and if that's the case, then Prowl sacrificed his life for nothing. Especially considering that they evacuated all of the humans in the city into Sumdac Tower's bomb shelter already. When a plot hole, a series of plot holes, completely undercut such a vital character moment, it is a problem. It is genuinely story-breaking. All of this Omega Supreme stuff is like Michael Bay levels of incoherent, and it's just so shocking for it to have come from Transformers Animated. It's a really bad finale, and I feel great getting that off my chest, because I've thought that for years, yet I've never once mentioned it in my almost 6 years on this platform we call YouTube.com. So anyway, number 39. Survival of the Fittest doesn't have anything egregiously wrong with it. It's not an episode I've ever thought of negatively, but it just lacks a pulse. Meltdown's back, and while it's a cool idea to merge his story with the Dinobots, the first of many times the show will interweave its storylines, I think the episode played its cards too early by showing us, the audience, that Meltdown is behind everything so long before the characters figure it out themselves. It's a pretty predictable mystery to begin with, but that just makes it more boring to watch and sucks the wind out of his dramatic reveal.
Our visitors seem lost. Perhaps we should give them a hand.
Acid burns. Is someone making you do this? Someone whose touch can melt your armor plating?
Normally when shows let the audience in on things before the characters is to create a sense of dread or of irony, but Survival of the Fittest doesn't do either. As a kid, I guessed that Lockdown was behind everything in 5 Servos of Doom, an episode that's very high on the list, and I remember feeling satisfied when he showed up. It would have been a very different experience if the episode just showed Lockdown and Sentinel making a deal at the 4-minute mark. Captain Fanzone's silly antics are the only spark this episode has going for it.
Does the name Titanic ring any bells?
That and the Dinobots' singular badass moment in the entire series that happens here before they're nerfed to hell and back in all future appearances is not terrible. Charles Darwin literally named an evolutionary theory after this episode because he enjoyed it so much, but it's far from the best the show has to offer.
The simpering fool who is unworthy to lick the mud off the heels of my platform shoes. Boogaloogaloogalooge.
Number 38. Velocity is an episode with a lot of really fun sequences, such as the ice fight with Blitzwing, and rescuing Fanzone from Blitzwing, or Blur's assault on Blitzwing. Basically everything with Blitzwing, per usual.
Oh, lucky I landed on something soft!
But beyond that, this is an episode that takes a very long time to kick into gear, and doesn't tend to offer much when it does. Velocity fails to commit to its own moral. The script is a tale about the consequences of bending the rules. Sari's pirated cable is drawn into question, and later she gets a hold of Master Disaster's remote, which can override the consciousness of a Cybertronian. Both are treated as a general application of breaking the rules, set against this backdrop of illegal street races. Sari drops the remote while controlling Blitzwing, and fans own, as well as the episode, seems to imply that this is a natural form of karma she had coming.
Well, that's the trouble with bending the rules. They usually snap right back in your face.
Soon, Sari happens to stumble across the remote on the ground. The remote she dropped several miles back, and uses it to save the day and drive away Blitzwing. Bumblebee would have been killed by a Decepticon if Sari hadn't used this evil, sinful remote that the episode says nothing good can come from. Then, in the end, Bumblebee cuts the cable to set a better example for Sari, which seems to contradict the notion that karma will inevitably come for you to bite you in the ass no matter what. This is the only episode that completely falls apart if you attempt to examine its themes, because pirating satellite cable and overriding someone's consciousness and free will are not aptly comparable.
Why can't I control myself? Not that I ever could!
Number 37. Rise of the Constructicons is a typical don't be peer pressured episode.
You, sure we should be doing this?
It does a perfectly competent job at what it's trying to do, but it's down here for a reason. 2 reasons. Mixmaster and Scrapper, as depicted in Season 2, are definitely an acquired taste, and they just never really acquired mine, even as a kid. I found them annoying.
Yo baby, honk if you love construction workers!
The episode's animation studio, The Answer Studio, tended to have a lot of quirks in its episodes, and is at its most Answer Studio-ist in this one, with a lot of wonky proportions and off-model drawings.
What?
Unlike Season 3, where the off-model artwork were just straight-up errors, here it seems like genuine artistic choices. And this episode's visually distinct from the rest in a fever dreamish kind of way. Like, there's no other episode where Bulkhead's mouth moves like this. There's plenty of things to enjoy. It's pretty funny to see motor oil used as an overt stand-in for alcohol.
Remind me to never touch this stuff.
Lugnut and Blitzwing are on their most iconic behavior today. I'd expect nothing less. But it's an episode that follows 2 generally annoying characters, and it's just never stuck out to me as a series highlight.
Scrapper! Think fast! Think what?
Number 36. A Bridge Too Close, Part 1. There's not a lot to say about this one because it's all table setting for the action-packed finale that is Part 2. It does its job and puts all the necessary pieces into play. It's cute how it brings back Bulkhead's love of art.
Can I move?
And Sari discovering her dad's been imprisoned by Megatron is a really great moment. I adore the formal introduction of Blur, though I will say it feels a bit disconnected from Velocity's ending. We last saw B waving at Blur and thanking him, and now he's randomly like, "You're a Decepticon, bitch, I'll kill you!" Unlike a lot of TFA season finales, Bridge Too Close Part 1 has a character arc running through it, that being Bulkhead's chip on his shoulder and insecurity about no one seeing his value. I bring this up now because Part 2 completely drops the ball when it comes to that arc. Much like the actual episode, I'm gonna leave you here with very little of substance and promise that you'll get more in Part 2.
Needs more color. Something bold.
Or perhaps some trees. Nature can be very inspiring.
Maybe it should have a caption. You know, so people can tell what it's supposed to be.
Ooh, maybe I was wrong about the color.
And the trees.
Now I think it needs a longer caption.
Number 35. Sound and Fury. I do feel somewhat bad placing it this low because it's a tight, functional, and well-executed script. Every piece is put into play to tell the story effectively at just the right times. I just don't feel much while watching it. Bulkhead and Sari's conflict, their miscommunication and jealousy, it's very predictable and stock. There isn't anything wrong with that, but it's not gonna get too high on the list either. Its predictability may also come down to it retreading a lot of identical story beats from Blast from the Past. It's a very inspired idea for a Soundwave origin story. I don't think it's the best take on Soundwave once the dust settled and many new iterations followed, but I appreciate that they tried to do something different. I'll always find it funny that Megatron designed his new body to have cool sunglasses for him. Also, Soundwave's final form is, what, 10 feet tall? Half the height of Optimus, according to the scale chart. Megatron really just designed a 10-foot tall body for himself, and I also find that very funny. All in all, Sound and Fury is full of novel ideas and clever writing.
I'm sorry, Bulkhead.
It's too late for sorry.
And it introduces the greatest character in all of Transformers fiction, Professor Princess, but that is not enough to make me love it. Number 34. The Elite Guard is almost like another pilot. Its main priority is introducing the character dynamics of the Elite Guard and their relationship to our main Autobots. I'll always appreciate the implied history between these characters and the demonstrable evidence that the creative team had a lot of the story planned out well ahead of time.
You, Tiny, step out from behind your overgrown pal!
I don't think he remembers us.
And that's just how I want to keep it.
Although you can also tell they didn't fully map out the Ratchet Omega Supreme stuff from Season 3, given how Ratchet and Magnus don't seem to interact at all, despite Ratchet's essential role in winning the war. The big stand up to bullies message once again feels a bit shoehorned in and undercooked.
So, Sentinel Prime, take your order and your condescending attitude and stick it in your hard drive.
It's fine overall, but rewatching the Elite Guard feels like replaying a less than thrilling tutorial level when you're already familiar with the gameplay.
Are you saying I can't prove I'm Isaac Sumdack's daughter?
I'm saying you can't even prove you exist.
Number 33, SUV, Society of Ultimate Villainy. This is a slow one which spends the first half of its runtime following the human supervillain's crime spree. They're entertaining enough. I really don't hate them, but I don't love them as much as, say, most other characters. This episode gives a much needed shot in the arm with the arrival of Swindle, whose slimy used car salesman persona is as addictingly entertaining as it is energetic, something that can be said for most of Fred Willard's performances. Rest in peace.
Megatron, you old warmonger! It's been stellar cycles! I can't tell you how tickled I was to learn that my favorite customer was still online. You look great, by the way.
I feel like the fact that Swindle utilized these humans just shows how much he studied the happenings of Detroit. He knew that if he were to transform into robot mode and rob the stores, the Autobots would descend on him relentlessly. Doing it fully in disguise, not even letting his compatriots in on his true nature whatsoever, goes to show how calculated his every move is.
Wait! Don't you want to negotiate?
Yeah, me neither.
Bumblebee's maybe at his brattiest in this episode. I'm fine with it. I like how sometimes Sorry's the voice of reason when Bee's being dumb, and other times Bee's the voice of reason when Sorry's being dumb. They really do just share one brain cell and complete each other.
He's stuck in park for good. Oh, and he's got a flat, too.
Number 32, Endgame Part 1. The first half of Endgame is a lot higher than its follow-up, and that's in large part due to a wonderful series of flashbacks that finally show how the team came together for the first time, and answer the long-running question of why Optimus fell out of Elite Guard's service. It gives us the final piece of context about his relationship with Sentinel, revealing he took the fall for Sentinel's reckless trip to Arca 7 that resulted in Alita's seeming death.
I was the senior cadet, sir. Whatever happened was my responsibility.
Seeing that Ultra Magnus clearly cares about Optimus, sensing that he can tell Prime is innocent but having his hands tied when it comes to sparing him from the punishment, recontextualizes everything we know about their relationship across the previous 40 episodes, as well as his feelings towards Sentinel.
Optimus Prime exhibited the qualities of a true leader: strategic thinking, determination, and above all, loyalty. Something you could stand to learn a thing or two about, Sentinel Prime?
It's a retcon so late in the game, but it feels really organic because, believe it or not, the outcome of this trial was established in this series' production bible before a single episode was written. The history was there all along, and now is an incredible time to reveal it. The highlight of this episode is seeing Prime and Prowl bond, both at their lowest points.
Do you have any idea what it's like to embark on a path only to find it so completely twisted and turned that you have no idea where you are?
Oddly enough, I do.
With everything we've learned about Prowl through the season, The parallels between him and Optimus are more pronounced than they've ever been before, and this episode does a really great job reconciling his Cyber Ninja origin with him being a member of a space bridge repair crew when we meet him. There's almost nothing to say about the rest of the episode beyond these flashbacks, funny enough. Part 1 is table setting for Part 2, just like Bridge Too Close. It's a series of things happening, but is thoroughly held together by the flashbacks, which ground the episode from Prime's perspective, culminating in him finally defying Ultra Magnus' orders that have hung over his head since the first episode.
And Prime, don't try to be a hero. It's not in your programming.
We can't use that.
So how are we supposed to take on Megatron?
We gotta even the odds somehow.
We will, but not with this.
He picks up the Magnus Hammer. It's a shame that this was the final step of his character arc. This was a wonderful moment for him, but hardly a conclusive one. Regardless, it's an emotional, if premature, spiritual finale to TFA that's undercut by the shit show that is In-Game Part 2. Number 31, A Bridge Too Close, Part 2. I know that the Season 2 finale is generally well regarded, and it's fun, it's entertaining as hell, but it's also a mess. So hear me out again.
I will remain loyal to you forever.
My biggest issue is Bulkhead's jarringly unfinished character arc. In Part 1, he's down in the dumps because no one thinks his art is good. No one's impressed by anything he does. He's kidnapped by Megatron and coerced into building the space bridge under threat that Megatron will hurt his friends. Now, here, Sumdac pitches an idea to Bulkhead. We make Megatron think we're working, but we stall it out and never finish. But Bulkhead says,
"Why doesn't anybody think I know anything?" Well, for once, I'm gonna be the one telling somebody else what to do. Now go make sure there's sufficient electron energy exchange compared to the cavity diameter, and stop questioning me!
Right, electron energy exchange. I'll get right on it. You're doing great.
And it's just played for laughs, like, haha, Sumdac's so silly, he thinks Bulkhead's kidding. In the end, Megatron goes to turn on the space bridge, and it works.
At long last, I will lead my troops back to Cybertron.
So Bulkhead just literally gave Megatron a path to conquer Cybertron because he had a chip on his shoulder. Part 1 gets that ball rolling, and Part 2 doesn't even fumble, it just straight up leaves the court. There's one joking acknowledgement of what just happened, and that's it.
Come on, Professor! We gotta shut down that space bridge!
Why did you make it work in the first place? What were you thinking?
This coming from the guy who rebuilt Megatron.
Are we not even going to acknowledge that Bulkhead just endangered the lives of all Autobots on Cybertron out of, what, spite? Is no character going to question this? Is Bulkhead not going to reflect on this? Marty Eisenberg's script for Part 2 just doesn't acknowledge the character work that Marcia Griffin set up in Part 1, to a baffling degree. Bulkhead only has 6 lines in Part 2, he's like the least important character. The episode feels sloppy like Season 3's finale, like the script needed a few revisions before the final product. For example, Megatron gives an order.
Mixmaster, find Lugnut and Blitzwing. Scrapper, back me up.
Only for Mixmaster to start fighting, not even backing Megatron up, just fighting, while Scrapper returns 9.5 minutes later having found Lugnut and Blitzwing. This isn't any sort of intentional gag, it's just a messy script. Another example, Prowl cuffs the liar Starscream and says,
"1 Starscream down, 5 to go."
This creates the impression they'll be going down the line and cuffing them one by one, only for the suck-up to immediately blow the cuffs off. Then there's no effort to stasis cuff a Starscream again, making one question why they'd even have Prowl say that. But beyond that, when Prowl says 1 down, another Starscream has already been neutralized at this point. 2 are down. It almost makes you wonder if this episode was rearranged in the edit and it broke continuity. I really believe, given the lack of polish here, that they just ran out of time when it came to these finales. Maybe they spent a little too long on the earlier episodes in this season and had to do mad dashes to complete the finales before the deadline. Prowl's processor over matter is introduced out of absolutely nowhere. I know it goes on to play a role in a lot of emotional episodes later in the show, but here Prowl randomly says, "Hey guys, I can open these cuffs with my mind, by the way," and Bumblebee's like, "No way," and then he does. And it's really weird. Not to mention Omega Supreme showing up and then sacrificing himself 5 minutes later. It's emotional in hindsight, I suppose, knowing the character's history, but it feels weightless and odd when you're watching this 2-parter for the first time and this guy shows up only to seemingly die. I will admit that a major sticking point of the show is that they literally just have one plot twist. Gasp! Surprise! This thing we didn't previously know was a transformer is a transformer with a big shocking music cue. Gasp, surprise, gasp, surprise, gasp, surprise, gasp, surprise, gasp, surprise. There was a book signing in 2010 where someone was like, Marty, could we ever see Metroplex transform? And he was like, no, you can't do that again. And I'm like, Marty, what do you mean? You did do it again. You kept doing it, dog. A bridge too close is a jumble of things happening without cause and effect. Prowl cuffs Ramjet, then Blur goes through a portal, then Bulkhead escapes Slipstream, then Optimus teams up with Megatron. You could swap the order of any of these in the narrative, and there's no difference. Almost the whole episode is like that. There's no real sense of progression, it's just a monotonous cluster. Don't get me wrong, the episode's stuffed to the brim with rewarding character moments, and above all, it's fun, it's a blast.
Aim for his spot chamber! Aim for his spot chamber! Don't tell me how to slide Megatron! I was slapping Megatron when you were still a gleam in my Spock!
And look how well that turned out!
That's what propels this one above the likes of SUV or Survival of the Fittest. There's also one hell of a cliffhanger. It's fun and rewarding to rewatch A Bridge Too Close Part 2, but it reeks of a rushed production timeline and a script that wasn't fully fleshed out.
Someone just take me offline now.
What do you think I've been trying to do for the last 4 million stellar cycles? It's funny, really, when you think about it. Tragic but funny!
Oh, shut up.
Number 30. Lost and Found is the proper introduction to Lugnut and Blitzwing beyond their scattered cameos in earlier episodes. As you can imagine from a story prominently featuring those two, there's a hell of a lot to enjoy. Their constant bickering, as well as Blitzwing's bickering with himself.
Shit. Tank! So shit. Tank! Shit. Tank! Why not scan both?
Not to mention Lugnut speaking to voices in his head. They're the most unhinged Decepticons in the show, and this is a fantastic outing for them.
Yes, as you command, Master.
They're also just very formidable here. The stakes rise so drastically whenever a Decepticon's present in Season 1, and the Autobots are so hopeless. Say what you will about the human supervillains being the main antagonists of the first season, but it made the Decepticons feel like a life or death event whenever they showed up. Sorry's a brat in this one, it's definitely her at her worst.
I think she's taking it well.
Sorry.
She's like a Transformers Prime human in this episode, but I think they tie it together during this moment where she confides to Ratchet in tears after he saves her from the flood, and he admits how much she means to him.
I've become surprisingly attached to this little planet and its people. Especially you.
You have?
If anything happened to you at the hands of the Decepticons, I'd never forgive myself.
Number 29 is Transform and Rollout Part 3. All 3 entries of Rollout feel very distinct from each other, and Part 3 is the most disconnected of the trilogy, feeling very much so like Marty Eisenberg wrote a 2-part premiere, only for Cartoon Network to be like, actually, we want a 3-parter, to which Marty said, Starscream shows up? An idea which was originally planned for much later in the season according to the production Bible. And in fact, the production Bible's description of Transform and Roll Out just describes parts 1 and 2, so I actually really think that is what happened. Seems like Marty weaved in thematic elements that were present in part 1, Optimus questioning what it means to be a hero, but it's not quite enough to make this feel like a cohesive part of a non-disjointed trilogy. But what works about this one? Starscream is terrifying. He is vicious, ruthless, and honestly more intimidating than Megatron ever gets to be in this show. And yet he still feels like the same character as the more comedic direction he goes in later, which speaks to the performance Tom Kenny was able to bring that unifies such starkly different tones. He flings Prime around like a ragdoll, he opens fire on a crowd of humans and tries to drop them to their death just to get the Allspark. It's compelling. Sorry and Bumblebee's missions to rescue each other are equally heartfelt.
You can trust this face, can't you?
Where I start to tune out is at the end. The Allspark was a mysterious, non-understandable entity, which basically meant it could be whatever Deus Ex Machina the show needed. So during the final battle with Starscream, the Allspark decides to just randomly explode and end the fight. And what's an even worse decision is the death of Optimus Prime, which occurs in episode 3 and lasts all of 40 seconds. I understand this was like a meta commentary on the franchise's habit of killing Optimus and just getting it out of the way early as a wink wink nod nod, but it sucks. Very few things annoy me more than death fake-outs. The shorter the time between the fake out and the reveal, the more annoying it is. Imagine if they'd actually just killed Prime here and never brought him back, leaving him as a martyr who'd hang over the rest of the series, as the remaining 4 Autobots fought to preserve his memory. That would have been bold. But instead, the series decides to introduce the full power of its most infamous get-out-of-jail-free card when Sarah uses her key to resurrect Optimus Prime. This completely absolves the show of actual life and death stakes until the key gets taken out 2 seasons later. And while no one's at risk of dying in most episodes, wind is really removed from the sails of Decepticon episodes when you know no one's actually in meaningful danger. They just shouldn't have done it. It's not like it's important later. It never comes up again. There is not a single moment in the entire series where anyone is like, hey Optimus, remember how you died? For all intents and purposes, this didn't even happen. Like, I think they just forgot about it. Killing and resurrecting Prime in episode 3 is, in my opinion, the most egregious sin this show ever committed, and it's lucky that it happened in an otherwise engaging episode to let it live this high on the list.
If they learn the truth behind my robotics empire, would they ever forgive me?
Number 28. Blast from the Past is exceptionally well animated and beautiful from start to finish. The extras here are actually fluidly animated as opposed to season 3 where they're legally not allowed to move whatsoever. The story though is just a bit basic. The Autobots take a backseat to the origin story of the Dinobots, created by Megatron as attack drones before the Allspark grants them sentience. Bulkhead's little arc of accepting his own strength rather than trying to fight like Prowl has all the beats that it needs to have, and Prowl's mini side story of sensing a spark in the Dinobots and refusing to let them be destroyed adds a wonderful little layer to his character. I really don't have much to say about this one. It did everything well, not necessarily exceptionally, but that's okay.
Give me that!
Number 27, Nanosec. The first episode of the show to be written, back when the series was more interested in pursuing the superhero angle, I think it's safe to call Nanosec the most basic episode of Transformers Animated. Mayhaps the most mid episode as well. It's a perfectly functional script, and Nanosec's rapid aging is an interesting twist. Bumblebee gets a lot of great moments to shine, everyone does, it's a pilot. Sumdak's the dumbest man alive today, which certainly isn't out of character.
This suit can increase human muscle speed and reaction time 1,000-fold. Unless you could move it in under 10 minutes. But nothing is that fast.
Comedian Brian Posehn's having the time of his life playing Nanosec. When I got cameos from the show's cast a couple of years ago, he genuinely sent the longest message talking about how much he loved his experience on the show.
Good heavens, the police! However shall I elude them?
There's this super janky looking shot where Bulkhead's super tall. Is yet another episode with no real flaws to speak of, it just pales in comparison to the heights that the show would achieve later. Also, the ending of 2012's Avengers film is like the exact same thing happening as the climax of this one. Joss Whedon owes Marty Eisenberg royalties, is all I have to say. Number 26, Transform and Roll Out Part 2 sticks out to me because of its adorable world building. Part 1 introduced us to our human and Autobot casts. Now it's time to bring them together and see how they react to each other for the first time. The results are wonderful.
What is that thing?
Must be some kind of pet.
Why would the four-legged bot want a pet that big?
The episode has a slower pace because it lets its characters react to every little thing that's going on, establishing plainly and clearly how different these characters' reactions are to any given situation, while also showcasing all of their strengths and weaknesses.
We need backup! Stat!
I'm busy!
That's an order!
Typical Academy bot. Rather hit a problem than fix it.
is everything the finale was missing. While part 1 had a lot more moving pieces to his plot and it's maybe more iconic, you can't take for granted how great of a job part 2 does at laying the groundwork for who these characters are. The villain of the episode is just a big sludge cockroach thing. We're presented with a simple threat so as much screen time can be dedicated to the main cast as possible. Is there a version of this episode with a more compelling villain here? I mean, maybe, sure. But you can't deny that it creates a very distinct premiere compared to countless other Transformers shows that open with a big Decepticon fight every time. Transformers Animated wanted to be different, and this episode more than succeeded at it.
Hi, I'm Bumblebee.
I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be. I like my name.
Number 25 and 24. The Human Error 2-parter. These are the first Season 3 episodes we're talking about beyond Endgame, which just goes to show the strength of that season. Remember when I said Rise of the Constructicons felt like a fever dream? I take it back. It's this one. The Autobots are trapped in human bodies, and it's just as confusing for them as it is for us. You spend like a minute of the episode watching Bulkhead try not to shit himself. I think it's unintentionally really funny to think that Soundwave simulated Bulkhead's bowels in depth, simulated the release of feces from said bowels.
Evan fought real hard to supervise that project.
It's a weird episode, but purposefully so. I think they take full advantage of the comedic potential of the premise.
Now I'm sharing Soundwave with the entire world for only $19.99 each.
$19.99? How does he do it?
As well as the emotional potential.
It's something I'd always imagined, even dreamt I'd experience, and yet something isn't quite right.
The build-up to the reveal of Soundwave is satisfying, as well as the revelation that Sari and the Autobots haven't been in the same Detroit this whole time. Animation-wise, this is among the lowest points of the show, as the whole special is littered with off-model characters, animation mistakes, and compositing errors that make it feel like a G1 ACOM episode. I will say the human error feels stretched. It feels like maybe 1.5 episodes worth of stuff happens. Part 1 ends with Soundwave retaking control and brainwashing the Autobots, and then 8 minutes into part 2, we've reached the exact same thing. Soundwave retakes control and starts brainwashing the Autobots. You could have cut the first 8 minutes of part 2 without consequence.
You know your episode's in trouble when your first 2 act breaks are the same plot point.
Yeah.
Originally, it was Mabel meets Romando. The first act break is I'm lonely. I want to leave. And then the second act break is I still want to leave.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that is 21 minutes of nothing.
Yeah. It just means the middle of your episode is just a giant double beat.
Is nothing happening. So I moved it so that she learns he's a merman at the end of Act 1, and at the end of Act 2, it's the we're getting out of here.
I think I'll always be a little bit bitter in the knowledge that in extending Human Error to a 2-parter, the Galvatron/Black Arachne a time travel apocalypse episode Bumble Prime was cut from the Season 3 lineup. So as you watch the Automen driving their own vehicle modes, know that this episode was produced on the grave of the coolest episode concept of all time. You know, what the hell was Soundwave even cooking today? If his plan was for the Autobots to not suspect anything was wrong, why didn't he just, not make them humans? Like, if he just simulated an ordinary day in Detroit where they're robots and maybe angry archers robbing a bank or something, I think his brainwashing plans would have gone a lot smoother. The main reason Human Error is propelled this high is because of Sari's substitute Autobots, a nonsense team of completely unrelated characters who she gathers to fight Soundwave to maximum comedic effect.
Redguard, you're with me.
Gosh, this is so sudden. Aren't we a little young to go steady?
As a kid, I cheered when Redguard showed up because I never thought we'd see him again. And every single line he has is gold. Considering he doesn't even show up till halfway through this episode, they really got their mileage out of Weird Al.
Cover me!
You got it!
And Scrapper is so charming and likable here. He's absolutely hilarious. He's such a pleasant character when pulled from the shadow of Mixmaster and the metaphorically bigger shadow of Dirt Boss. The way he just decided Snarl is his pet, and Snarl acts like a cat who doesn't care about his owner at all, is just precious. I would like to hug both of them at once. Very funny 2-parter with a lot of sweet moments set against the backdrop of Christmas. Despite its flaws and the episode that could have been, I'm really fond of it.
Impossible.
Number 23, Mission Accomplished. Best remembered for the Starscream death montage, Mission Accomplished is just a satisfying and well-handled story with a lot of moving parts. All these important moments to the overall series narrative, like Megatron announcing his return to all the Decepticons across the galaxy, are woven in very organically. I think this episode marks the end of Transformers Animated's frequent repetition that plagued its first season. For instance, how many episodes can we possibly have about Sorry learning to use her key more responsibly? Oh, 4? Great.
You really shouldn't use it unless it's absolutely necessary.
You sure you should be using your key on that thing?
That key is not a toy.
After all, it's not a toy.
Mission Accomplished here is the third instance of an episode where the Autobots have to leave Earth for good, and Sorry is super sad.
We need to lead the cons off planet first, and keep Earth out of the crossfire.
Sorry. Please, try to understand. We don't have a choice.
I lose my dad, and now you guys?
I'm afraid orders are orders.
But I think it's handled the best here, and the focus is more so on the Autobots forcing fans own against his will to be Sorry's new dad. Seeing Optimus stick it to Sentinel and prove Ultra Magnus wrong is always satisfying. Mission Accomplished is an episode with no flaws to speak of. It's just peak.
Don't worry, Captain Fanzone. We can still hang out.
Yeah, I'll clear my calendar.
Number 22. Auto Boot Camp is the first episode set primarily on Cybertron and the introduction of the long-running Shockwave double agent storyline. It's great to see a Bumblebee and Bulkhead origin story and introduce this new character aspect of B, his desire to serve in the Elite Guard, his desire to mean something. It makes a lot of sense with the character we've seen up until this point, and it makes him a lot more symbolically similar to Optimus. As a kid, I accurately clocked that Long Arm was the spy, yet I simultaneously didn't understand that the flashbacks were flashbacks. I have no clue why. I understood every other episode, but I just didn't know what was happening with this one because I was a dumb child. They kept cutting back and forth between Earth and Cybertron, and I was like, what's going on? It's so much fun. I love Bumblebee's constant failure to spy on Wasp, always getting Sentinel injured or humiliated. It's a wonderfully executed sequence of events, made even better by the smash cuts to transform-ups every time.
Put your servos into it! 26! 27!
This was an incredibly innovative way to introduce Shockwave to the series, giving him this involved double agent storyline that they foreshadowed earlier in the season.
Send out a transmission to our double agent on Cybertron.
Auto Boot Camp's just a really strong episode that sets the stage for the back half of season 2.
147! 148! 149!
With that, we've covered 21 episodes, the exact halfway mark, and that's what we're gonna call it for today. Because this is not my big channel where I can have 9-hour videos and people will watch the whole thing. We haven't even talked about characters like Lockdown or Jetfire and Jetstorm yet, which just proves how based they are. We also haven't talked about the Headmaster yet. I don't really know what that proves. Come back for part 2 with 90% less bitching and moaning. See you soon.